Welcome back to CIA Declassified. It is 1961. You are standing on the Greenland ice cap 800 miles from the North Pole. The world above is a blinding, featureless white desert where the wind screams at 100 miles per hour and the temperature drops so low it turns exhaled breath into falling ice crystals. But beneath your boots, a different world exists. You descend a vertical timber-lined shaft, the light from the surface fading into a dim electric blue. As you reach the bottom, the wind vanishes, replaced by a surreal pressurized silence and the low industrial hum of a nuclear heart beating in the deep. You step off the ladder and your boots crunch onto a floor of packed crystalline powder that never melts. The air down here is unnervingly still, a sharp contrast to the chaotic gale howling just 30 feet above your head. As you walk down the main corridor, known as Fifth Avenue, the walls vibrate with a low-frequency thrum that you feel in your teeth. The sound of the massive ventilation fans struggling to keep the tunnels from being a CO2 trap. The ceiling overhead is a ribcage of corrugated steel arches encrusted with hoarfrost that sparkles like crushed diamonds under the string of naked swaying light bulbs. Deep in the lateral trenches, the blue light effect becomes overwhelming. The ice itself seems to glow from within, a deep prehistoric azure that makes you feel like you're walking through the veins of a frozen giant. You pass a door and catch the incongruous smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee drifting from the mess hall, a jarring reminder of domesticity in a place that should be uninhabitable. But then the floor shudders. It's not an earthquake. It's the glacier moving, the sound of millions of tons of ice groaning as it slowly tries to reclaim the space humans have dared to hollow out. You realize that when you aren't just in a base, you're inside a slow-motion car, crash-made of ice. This is the city under the ice. You walk down a trench 300 feet long, its walls translucent and glowing with an eerie sapphire luminescence. The ceiling is a massive corrugated steel arch supporting thousands of tons of ancient snow. To your left, a modern hospital. To your right, a laboratory where scientists are drilling the world's first deep ice cores. The air smells of diesel and the faint, sweet scent of floor wax. Men in parkas move with purpose through these sub-glacial streets, living in prefabricated plywood barracks that look like high-tech trailers nestled in a frozen cathedral. But as you move deeper into the tunnels, away from the prying eyes of the press, the research station facade begins to slip. You see the massive empty galleries carved out by the Peter plow. You see the reinforced tracks being laid, not for supplies, but for a ghost train that would carry the weight of the world's end. The silence here isn't just the absence of wind, it's the silence of a secret buried so deep that even the government of Denmark hasn't been told the full truth. You are standing in the world's most dangerous basement, a nuclear fortress where the ultimate weapon is hidden behind a wall of ice. Why the name? Records from the U.S. Army Engineers Studies Center indicate the project was dubbed Iceworm as a literal description of its intended operation. Much like the biological iceworm that thrives within the glacial structure, the project envisioned a system of mobile launchers that would burrow within the glacial structure. The project had envisioned them burrowing through the 2,500 miles of tunnels, never staying in one place long enough for Soviet satellites to find them. While Camp Sentry was the official cover used to satisfy the public and Danish officials, Project Iceworm was the classified military designation for the nuclear missile network itself. And of course, the military was doing this in tandem and with assistance from CIA personnel. Ergo, we have an episode. To find the truth of the iceworm, we must look past the frozen curtain and into the engineering of the Cold War. The project was a U.S. Army program, though it operated in high-level cooperation with CIA intelligence regarding Soviet strike capabilities. The facility housed the PM-2A, the world's first portable nuclear power plant, which is so cool. If you've paid attention to any of the episodes, you know I'm a huge proponent of nuclear power. The cover story of a research station resulted in the first deep ice climate cores ever drilled. The plan called for 600 Iceman missiles, a modified two-stage version of the Minuteman. The tunnels were carved using Swiss-made Peter plows. The project envisioned 52,000 square miles of the ice cap being utilized for launch sites. Operation Lead Dog was the reconnaissance mission that scouted the site in 1959. The facility included a barber shop, a theater, and a chapel for the 200 residents. The project discovered that the Greenland ice sheet moves much faster than predicted, up to 3 feet a month. The glacial creep caused the tunnels to deform and eventually collapse. The Danish government was never told about the nuclear missiles. The nuclear reactor was removed in 1963 due to the shifting ice. The site was abandoned in 1967, left to be entombed by snow. Studies show that melting ice may expose the site's toxic waste by the year 2090. The project utilized rod wells to melt ice into fresh drinking water. Army engineers proved that humans could live indefinitely under the ice. The missiles were intended to be moved on specialized rail cars. The project cost an estimated $2.7 billion in adjusted currency. The Thule Air Base served as the primary logistics hub for the construction. The project utilized cut-and-cover construction techniques. Engineers tested thermal drills to penetrate the deep ice. The faculty had 21 main trenches covered by steel arches. The Army produced a 30-minute promotional film about Camp Century in 1963. Geologists at the camp found ancient plant DNA at the bottom of the ice core. The project determined that the high ground of the Arctic was viable for second strike capability. The PM-2A reactor produced 1.56 megawatts of power. The air inside the tunnels was kept at a constant 17 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent melting. The facility utilized a swing shift schedule to maintain 24-hour operations. The Iceman missiles were designed to be launched through soft ice ceilings. The project mapped the bedrock beneath 4,500 feet of ice. Construction required over 6,000 tons of steel and timber. The Peter plows could mill 1,200 cubic yards of snow per hour. Water consumption was approximately 10,000 gallons per day. The city under the ice had its own zip code during its operation. The library at Camp Century contained over 5,000 books for morale. The project used dye tracing to track the movement of liquid waste through the ice. The thermal drills used at the site could melt through 50 feet of ice per hour. Gravity surveys were conducted to determine the exact thickness of the ice sheet. The project tested the effect of polar T3 syndrome, Arctic hysteria, on soldiers. The reactor's spent fuel was transported back to the U.S. in lead-lined casks. The base included a fully equipped dental clinic. Engineers used pneumatic tubes for internal document delivery. The ice cap's fern layer acted as a natural insulator for the trenches. The project tested vibration sensors to detect incoming Soviet bombers over the pole. Camp Century was located at an elevation of 61 and 80 feet above sea level. The laundry facility could process 400 pounds of clothing daily. The Iceman missile guidance system was hardened against magnetic pole interference. The project utilized radioisotope thermoelectric generators, RTGs, for remote sensors. Army cooks at the base were trained to prepare 4,000 calorie a day meals. They were eating good in their chow hall, huh? The project utilized synthetic snow to fill gaps in the steel arch supports. Over 30 miles of internal wiring were laid within the ice tunnels. The base used a master clock system synchronized with the air base. The project measured the isostatic depression of the Greenland landmass. The base's emergency exit shafts were kept clear by manual shoveling every 6 hours. The project tested the use of acoustic ranging to map hidden glacial crevices. A quote from General Alden K. Sibley during the reactor's activation: "We are building a city that will never see the sun for a war we hope never to fight." Declassified report from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dated 1964. "The ice is a living thing. It moves, it breathes, and it eventually crushes everything we build." A declassified 1960 Army Engineer Studies Center report: "Greenland offers the unique adaptability for nuclear deployment, ... It is the ultimate hidden fortress." A quote from Chester Langway, lead geologist at Camp Century: "The scientific value of the ice cores is the only thing the ice won't eventually take back." A declassified CIA intelligence memorandum dated 1962, "The strategic significance of the Arctic waste has transitioned from a barrier to a front line." A declassified internal U.S. Army strategic planning document says, "Our presence under the ice is a silent checkmate to any transpolar aggression." And a declassified final project iceworm feasibility summary: "The technical feasibility of the iceworm project is proven. Only the movement of the Earth itself remains the adversary." End quote. Within the declassified files for Project Iceworm, a significant section titled Appendix B, Environmental Countermeasures and Signature Suppression, is heavily redacted. Roughly 85 pages are entirely blacked out, protected under Exemption B1 for national defense and Exemption B3 for statutory secrecy. I suspect these pages detail the methods the CIA and Army used to hide the massive heat output of a nuclear reactor from Soviet infrared surveillance. Personally, I speculate that there are substantial redactions in the biological containment protocols because I believe the military was testing the survival of certain pathogens in the deep ice. Not as a weapon, but to see if Soviet biological agents could persist in the Arctic environment. Furthermore, I believe the most sensitive redactions involve the sovereignty protocols, the secret legal maneuvers designed to bypass Danish law if the missiles had to be launched without permission. And I'm not the only one with theories. The ice hides more than just metal. It hides the imagination. There's the ancient discovery theory. It's a persistent one that claims that the deep core drilling didn't just find mud. It found evidence of pre-human civilizations or artifacts that necessitated the heavy military presence. Then there's the nuclear leak speculation. Some claim that the reactor didn't just leak coolant, but that a critical event occurred that was scrubbed from the record, leading to the sudden abandonment of the project earlier than planned. The hidden city theory, a darker speculation, suggests that while Camp Century was abandoned, a second, deeper tier of the facility remained active for decades, serving as a continuity of government bunker for the elite during the Cold War. The atmospheric manipulation theory. Some theorists believe Iceworm was actually a front for early experiments in weather warfare, using the nuclear reactor to heat the ice cap and trigger specific atmospheric pressure changes to steer storms towards Soviet territory. Was Project Iceworm a success? Tactically, it was a geological defeat. The project was a failure because it underestimated the power of the glacier. The movement of the ice, the glacial creep, meant the tunnels had to be constantly recarved. You cannot have a precision missile system in a room that is shrinking by 3 feet a month. The structural stress would have snapped the launch rails like toothpicks. To maintain the 2,500 miles of planned tunnels, it would have required a maintenance force of thousands working 24/7 just to fight the ice back. However, it was a tactical success in proving that the U.S. could deploy modular nuclear power in the most remote environments on the planet. It proved that human life could be sustained in a closed-loop environment, a blueprint that would later be used for space exploration and deep-sea habitats. The sheer audacity of the engineering, carving a functioning city out of a moving frozen river, showed a level of tactical imagination that terrified the Soviet command. Strategically, it was the ultimate deterrent. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. The mere possibility of 600 missiles hidden in the ice forced the Soviet Union to divert massive resources to Arctic surveillance, effectively pinning down their intelligence assets in a fruitless search for Ghost. It established Greenland as a permanent strategic asset that provided the U.S. with absolute proximity to the Soviet heartland. Even though the missiles were never placed, the threat of the ice worm changed the geography of the Cold War forever by making the Arctic a viable theater of operations. By the time the project was officially canceled, the strategic message had been sent. American technology was capable of colonizing the most hostile terrains to ensure nuclear parity. It forced the Kremlin to reconsider the invulnerability of their northern borders. The ghost city of Camp Century served as a giant decoy, a move in a global chess game that allowed the U.S. to secure its northern flank while the world's attention was focused elsewhere. The operational and technological breakthroughs of Project Iceworm are the foundation of our modern world. Deep core ice drilling. Today, this is the primary tool for climate change research, allowing scientists to see 100,000 years into the past. The military applies this to Arctic submarine navigation using ice density data to hide from sonar. The intelligence community utilizes it for atmospheric forensics, tracking the history of nuclear tests through trapped gas in the ice. Portable nuclear power. Today, this logic powers small modular reactors being designed to provide clean energy to remote towns and disaster zones, SMRs. The military applies this to forward operating bases, FOBs, and directed energy weapon systems. The intelligence community utilizes it for deep sea listening posts that require power for decades without refueling. Sub-Glacial engineering. Today, this logic is used in permafrost infrastructure for pipelines and roads in the Arctic. The military applies this to hardened underground command centers that must resist seismic shifting. The intelligence community utilizes it for seismic surveillance, using the Earth's own movement to detect underground nuclear tests. And extreme environment logistics. Today, this powers the logistics for the International Space Station, treating the Arctic as a space analog. The military applies this to the Arctic Response Force, ensuring troops can survive and fight in negative 70-degree weather. The intelligence community utilizes it for global asset recovery, retrieving sensitive hardware from the most inaccessible regions of the globe. The legacy of the iceworm is a reminder that even the most powerful nations are subject to the laws of nature. We tried to build a throne of ice, and the ice simply moved. But in that failure, we found the keys to understanding our planet's history. Project Iceworm proved that the greatest secrets aren't always in a file. Sometimes they're frozen in time, waiting for the sun to find them. The project leaves us with a haunting image, a city of steel and glass, once vibrant with the sounds of human ambition, now crushed into a thin layer of debris deep within the glacial strata. It is a monument to the hubris of a decade that believed it could out-engineer the world itself. As the ice continues its slow march toward the sea, it carries with it the remnants of our paranoia and our genius, a radioactive time capsule that will eventually be delivered back to the ocean, reminding us that nothing stays buried forever. In the end, the frozen throne was never truly ours to occupy. It belonged to the silence and the cold, forces that watched as we tunneled and dreamed, only to gently fold the earth back over our work. But as we look at the climate data today, the very record born from this secret mission, we see that the iceworm's most lasting impact wasn't a missile launch, but a warning. It taught us that the ice is not just a place to hide a war, it is a witness to the survival of the world itself. Nature doesn't negotiate with engineers, it simply waits for the lease to expire. Hiding nuclear waste in someone else's backyard is a great way to turn a secret into a permanent environmental lawsuit. True resilience is about working with the world's gears, not trying to jam a wrench into them. And remember, the most important piece of advice is that the planet always gets its deposit back, so try not to build your fortress out of things that melt. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we examine Project Trident, the master plan for CIA and Navy cooperation in Black maritime operations. We'll look at the shadow fleet of the 1970s, the deep sea intercepts, and the reality of a war fought beneath the waves where the only rule was don't get caught. Join us next time for the Abyssal Hand. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.